Greetings. Namaste and greetings. I, Remat Arora, researcher at IMPRI, Impact and Policy Research Institute, Prabhav Evam Niti Anusandhan Sansthan, Nai Delhi, extend my warmest welcome to you all to IMPRI #Web Policy Talk. We are gathered today for a panel discussion on education, S&T, R&D and Interim Union Budget 2024 to 25 as part of IMPRI's fourth annual series of thematic deliberations and analysis of Interim Union Budget 2024 to 25. This discussion is organized by the #IMPRI Center for ICT for Development, CICTD, IMPRI Impact and Policy Research Institute, New Delhi, as part of IMPRI #Web Policy Talk series. I welcome all of you to this enlightening deliberation and thank you for tuning in to this discussion. Now let me introduce the esteemed gathering for today. Our chair for the session is Professor Sachidanand Sinha ji, Visiting Professor IMPRI. We welcome you, sir. The distinguished panelists for the session are Dr. Y. Suresh Reddy ji, Director, SRF Foundation, Gurgaon, Dr. Khalid Khan ji, Visiting Senior Fellow, IMPRI, Dr. Protiva Kundu ji, Thematic Lead, Social Sectors, Centers for Budget and Governance Accountability, CBGA, New Delhi, and Visiting Senior Fellow, IMPRI, Advocate Anubha Shrivastava Sahai ji, President India Wide Parents Association lawyer and child rights activist, Professor Mona Khare ji, Professor and Head, Department of Education, Finance, National Institute of Educational Planning and Administration, NIEPA, New Delhi, and Visiting Professor IMPRI. Welcome to all. We look forward to learning from our esteemed gathering. Now, without any further ado, let us start the program. It is my honor and privilege to invite Professor Sachidanand Sinha ji to start the program with the chair's opening remarks. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Rahmat. I think, as we all know that we are meeting today in order to discuss the interim union budget 24-25, and particularly the provisions that the budget provides insofar as education, science and technology, research and development, and related issues are concerned. In fact, this is the fourth year in running after the the national education policy was introduced. And, in the national education policy, it was clearly stated that, though there was no timeline, but it said that, we would try to achieve an expenditure which would be close to about 6% of the GDP, and we will be progressively moving in that direction. Ironically, in the last 3.5 years, our experiences are that, whatever allocations that have been made, they have been progressively coming down. I can understand that, during the COVID years, there were constraints of several kinds, but perhaps, when you have difficulties, you really need to pump in more money, more resources, because it was about education, educating children in remotest parts of the country among various socially and economically marginalized sections. But the outcomes were of a different nature. I think, it pertains to the fact that, the children's right to education, which in fact was one of the milestones in 2009, that for the first time, Government of India accepted that particular right to education needs a much higher allocation in the union budget, and also their provisions downwards, because education largely pertains effectively it is in the state's domain, provincial domain, although it is very much on the concurrent list. So I think, when the provisions or allocation is less, much more important is the fact that whatever is allocated has not been spent year after year. And I think, Protiva would be in a position to throw better lights as to whether whatever I'm saying is correct or there are problems with my statement. But this is what my layman's reading of the budget is, that, the provisions were small and, in relation to GDP, they have been a progressive decline. And, the expenditures have certainly not been to the tune, to the mark that perhaps all of us would have wanted it to be. So I think, the order in which we'll be having our panelists today, we'll start with Dr. Protiva Kundu, and then we'll move on to Anubha ji. Dr. Y. Suresh Reddy has also joined us. Good afternoon. And, I hope, if Khalid is all right, he would also join us. And so over to you, Protiva. The floor is all open for you.
Thank you, sir. And thank you, IMPRI, for actually having this webinar, because the discussion around, you covered many various areas, but the discussion around education is very important because it is linked to all many sectors, development and growth. So whenever we are talking about this year's interim budget, maybe we can start with in the which fiscal headroom the budget has been presented. So if we look at the economic growth, then the projection is around India is growing around, supposed to grow around at 7% rate. And if we look at the estimation given for the total revenue collection through taxes or total receipt, it has been suggested that it will grow from 50% to 55% that has been projected for the coming year. If we look at the tax to GDP ratio, it has been increased, and again, estimation is saying that there is a growth. So in this overall, in the revenue mobilization part, we are doing well. So in this backdrop, we have got a budget of around 47.65 lakh. Now, if we look at this budget, total union budget from the previous year, it is around an increase of 6%. And in this line, if we see our education budget, especially the nodal ministry, which is Ministry of Education's budget, which is around 1.12 lakh crore, again, an increase of 6% or 6.8% from the previous year's budget estimate. So basically, the way the expenditure has been grown and that has been projected, increase in expenditure, that way the education expenditure also been, expenditure budget is, education budget is also has been estimated. So it's more of an incremental kind of budget, if we can say. Now, if we deep down a bit more about the education budget, within there are two sectors, two departments, Department of School Education and Literacy and Department of Higher Education. And in both the departments, if we compared it from the last year's revised estimate, then while there is very marginal increase, around 0.7% increase for the Department of School Education, around 17% cut in the budget of Department of Higher Education. Now, important is this is the overall increase and decrease and the pattern of total budget. But important is we need to see this budget from the implementation point of view of National Education Policy 2020. Now, so this is the fourth year of NEP. So if this total budget like 1.12 lakh crore is been converted into the country's GDP, it's come out to be 0.37% of GDP. So now our target, as Sir was talking in her, sharing in his opening remarks, that there is NEP is talking about 6% of GDP for public education. Public education, public spending means both center and states together will spend 6%. But at this stage, the nodal ministry, that is Ministry of Education, is spending 0.37% of GDP. That means, we can understand that how much resources would be required and that responsibility is more on states, but states are also suffering from revenue mobilization constraints. And even this Indian government's contribution to GDP education sectors, it was during the inception of NEP or 2020, it was around 0.44%. So over time, it has decreased. So this is the first point to make, that if financial implementation of NEP, implementation of NEP needs a financial boost, but somehow the allocation is not at par. Now, again, if we look very closely towards the distribution or design of budget of this total education budget, the budget of Department of School Education, 70%, more than 70% is getting financed through education cess. And for the Department of Higher Education, again, more than 33%, around 33% is getting financed through education cess. So the cess was earlier, 2005-06, the primary education cess was imposed. In 2006-07, higher secondary education cess was imposed. The cess are for specific purpose and for specific timeline. And it was the idea that over time, this cess will supplement the need of the need for funding the government financing for education. But over time, we are seeing that cess is becoming the primary source of financing education. Now, the second part is, again, if we look at each of the department's budget more closely, then another pattern has come out. And this is the pattern we observed for the last 2-3 years. That is, the more increase in allocation is going towards the exemplar schools or model schools like Kendriya Vidyalaya, Navodaya Vidyalaya, PM Sri schools. But if we look at these schools, they cater, I think around 14,500 schools have been proposed, and they cater very limited amount of number of students, whereas the larger number of students, they are getting catered, comes under the purview of Samagra Shiksha Abhijan. And if we look at the Samagra Shiksha Abhijan's budget, it has increased, I think, around 47 or for the last year, it's around that much, 47 crore. Now, more important is, of the whole Samagra Shiksha Abhijan budget, it's actually 100% is getting financed through education cess. So the scenario is that the scheme which is responsible for many of the components of school education, starting from quality, teachers, infrastructure, the scheme is not actually getting support, adequate budgetary support. And similarly is the case for another key centrally sponsored scheme, that is midday meal, or it's now renamed as PM Poshan. So even there, it's very marginal increase. Now, this is the overall scenario. Now, we have seen that over time that the challenges were there, like the teacher shortage, infrastructure, not proper infrastructure is there, socioeconomic inequities. Then there are various kinds of challenges were earlier there, and that has made a large number of students out of school. But over time, there are new challenges emerging, like digital divide, like climate change. So the situation is getting more aggravated, and since most of the students who are from the marginalized communities are very much dependent on public provisioning of school education, so any kind of change actually, they suffers more if there is any kind of changes happen, and if there is little lesser fund towards school education, it impacts them more. So that's why the next question, it's important to ask that whether the budget is actually addressing the issue of equity or inclusivity. So one of the important indicators is, I would say, scholarships, which actually help many students from these marginalized communities to retain in the system. So there are various kinds of scholarships. Now, if we look at even at the pattern of scholarship, financing for scholarship, this year, the pre-matric scholarship for minorities, pre-matric scholarships for students with disabilities, for scheduled caste and OBC, for every students from all these categories, there is either a budget cut or a stagnant budget as compared to the last year. The only the only area where some progressive changes has happened is for the students from the scheduled tribe communities, where whether it's pre-matric and post-matric scholarship, both the cases there is increase, though marginal. But this time also there is some emphasis on all the tribal children who are much, who lives in more remote areas, not much development uh, fund is reaching to them. Is there basically there is one new schemes introduced this time is PM Jan Man Yojana, and for that there is some resources from Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan have been set aside for these children. And another intervention, which was again a kind of model schools like Eklavya residential model schools, that was from the last 2 years. There is a conscious effort to actually providing quality education to the tribal children, and the scheme has got adequate attention in this budget. This is about the scenario in terms of inclusivity and equity, but we have seen during COVID, UDICE data is also showing that there is drop in enrollment, especially at the secondary level and higher secondary level. And uh, if we specifically look at the budget, what is going for secondary education overall for the public center and states together, it is still less than 1% of GDP. Since we talk so much about the very low female labor force participation rate, we talk about the lack of job because of the absence of skilled workforce. So there is a need to put more resources towards secondary education, which is a bridge between the higher education and it will help in giving an employment opportunity to the students. But higher education, secondary education, especially for the adolescent girls, there is need for more resources, but it's still less than 1% of GDP, both state and center and states together spending. And those schemes which actually help in improving secondary education for girls, one of the schemes was discontinued in 2 years back. And then whatever intervention should be there for Samagra Shiksha Abhijan, there is not adequate resources we have seen. The third point I would like to mention here is about digital divide. So we have seen during COVID-19 how the digital access to digital devices or education through digitization was such a challenge, because there are so many children that don't have different kinds of challenges they faced. And in fact, the recently released ASA survey report have shown that though many of them actually had access to some sort of devices, but very few own those and very few have the knowledge of applying those for their study. But we see that over time, even NEP is also supporting for online technology-driven education. There is more emphasis on digitization, but that needs that needs two things. One is improving the digital infrastructure in school, and the other is improving the digital infrastructure overall in the country. And in both the cases, we couldn't find much resources or much budgetary allocation this time. The earlier schemes like PMEB, eVidya, MOOC, these are the SIAM Prova, these are the schemes where they are mentioned in the last year budget, but this time there is no such budget line or resources we could find in the budget document. But there are some initiatives we have seen it at the higher education level in terms of there are schemes like Digital India has, there is a boost in allocation from 420 crore to 505 crore. Then there is one Center of Excellence for Artificial Intelligence. This institution have got a huge budget allocation, 35 crore to 255 crore. There is one digital university where the budget was earlier in 2023-24 was around 4 crore, but now it is 100 crore. So some kind of digitization or digitalization of higher education we have seen. But even in the higher education, the whole train as sort of shifting priority from the general school to exemplar school, or the general universities to some excellence world-class institutions, or IIT, IIM, not IIMs, the IITs, their Center of Excellence, more resources is going towards that. And that's why we have also seen that the UGC budget cut and around, I mean, in the last 5 years, the budget has slashed by 44%. But these are the institutions which are very responsible so much for colleges and universities at the state and central level. National level. So overall, if we look at the budget, then a somewhat shifting priorities observed, and which is actually impacting the children, the student, the people from who are coming from the marginalized communities. So somewhere there is, at least at the higher education, that equity or inclusivity question, is becoming a concern. So I think since it was a vote on account, but hopefully in the coming year, not coming year, this year, when we'll get the full budget, some of the issues would be addressed. I'm stopping here. Thanks.
Thank you, Protiva. Just a few queries. Some of the experts who have been working on financing education expenditure, they have been saying that, the last year's budgetary allocations were, whatever that was made was not fully utilized. So what is the status there? That's I would like you to tell us something about that. And secondly, what is really the allocation? Because, this would also mean that, we'll have to go to and take a look at the Women's and Child Welfare Ministry with respect to preschool, because, this was one of the major major point of entry of the national education policy, which said that, we will emphasize on preschool education, although preschool education has been part and parcel of the first Education Commission report, Kothari Commission report also. The first page itself pertains to preschool education. But because of certain reasons, we could not really go ahead with that. So what is the status on the preschool? Because that is very important. And what is the government thinking in terms of its policies, and whether those are getting reflected in the budgetary allocation, particularly with, say, revamping the Anganwadis. Anganwadis, the way they are at the moment, they only cater to nutritional needs of children and mother. And they do not have the expertise or maybe personnel at the Anganwadi, where they could perhaps be engaged in early childhood education. So there, I think there is a greater need to, in fact, think about and make allocations. Training programs of a few weeks cannot transform, the attendance at the Anganwadi into teachers, because that's a very, very important area, and very sensitive foundational education requires much trained manpower. So what is really happening there? Thirdly, on the scholarships, as you said, but for the scheduled tribes, every other community has received a lesser allocation. In fact, I was looking at some figure. So there is none, perhaps, for minority scholarships and SC scholarship and OBC. There was no figure shown. I mean, I don't know what did that mean. So that is yet another area of concern. Scholarships in general for higher education has been a problem, in fact, with some of these, like, you had Maulana Azad from a scholarship for minorities, which was also stopped. Whether there is a commensurate increase in the the UGC allocation has also declined by about 61% this year in comparison to last year. So what what all these things, I mean, there are, say, I can understand that there is more emphasis on digitization, which in fact, but, will digitization in the face of the fact that, okay, the digital India and the digital divide would finally be overcome. But looking at the ground realities, especially for children in the early stages of school education and say the upper primary, how would this impact the current children and in the coming years, how would that impact their education? There is also the fact that, there is year after year, teachers are retiring. And if you look into the statistics of every state, the number of children, number of teachers that are required is humongous. And there is very little that, I mean, naturally, we cannot really read from the interim budget all these things because this is the national budget, the union budget, but it would get reflected, and whether it would get reflected in the state budgets and all that, because they're also looking out for revenues to, in fact, closing down schools in the name of school merger and all that. There is a continuous movement in that direction. In MP, several hundred schools have been closed down. In Jharkhand, there are indications. And Jharkhand being a forest area and mining area with small population in every hamlet, if schools are closed down, it would really create problems for their access to schools and their education. So even with more money for residential schools, I don't think residential schools can really cater to all that the tribal children or the scheduled tribe children really require. So these are some of the concerns. We'll have yet another round on science and technology and research and development, because these are our areas that we should be talking about. So what would you like to add on some of these, particularly the preschool part?
Sure.
And then we can go on to the others.
Yeah. So let me first talk a little bit about utilization. If I mean, of course, this union budget, whatever we get, I mean, we get two information in the budget document. It's not only about the budget estimate of the coming years, but also the actual expenditure happened in 22-23 and the revised estimate for 23-24. And if we look at those figures, we can see that for the 22-23, whatever being allocated, 93% of that have been the department, I mean, the ministry has been able to utilize. And for the revised estimate, the expenditure is as for we can say it's a proxy expenditure. It's around 114% of the what is being allocated. So it's completely, I mean, clearly shows that there is improvement in fund utilization. In fact, looking at the pattern of spending, it shows that there is a need for more resources. And if we could remember that during when the NEP was getting implemented, the Ministry of Education actually asked around 10,37,000 around, I mean, this amount of money for the implementation of NEP for the 5 years in the 15th FC period, starting from 21-22 to 25-26. That means every year you need to get a new, the minister was asking for around 2 lakh crore. So that was, they have estimated in terms of resources. And we can see that this is the 4th year, but for the last year, last year we get a budget of 1 lakh and above, and this year 1.12 lakh. Before that, it was below 1 lakh crore. So there is, it itself shows that ministry needs more resources according to their estimation, and then allocation is not at par. Now, when there is allocation is not at par, suppose suppose when there is need for more infrastructure and then money is going for civil works, it should go as per the scheduled rate decided at the state level or the rate of the central public work departments. Now, if the norm, financial norm is such that which is lesser than the market rate, then what happened? The states just surrender the money, they won't able to do with that money the kind of infrastructure would be required. So then it shows there is the fund that goes to you, you have not able to utilize that. So it's an underutilization will show in your account. But the important is how two things: how the money is getting, I mean, what kind of financial norms is there, how the money budget is being designed. And the next question is also about where the money is going. Suppose if we look at the teacher, I mean, huge shortage of teacher. Even that's the Parliamentary Standing Committee report. It has shown that of the around 9 lakh vacancies, 75% in elementary level, 15% at the secondary level, 19% at the higher secondary level. So we need to put resources for teacher. Of course, union government doesn't recruit teacher now, and there is some recruitment through Samagra Shiksha Abhijan, but it has been mentioned that no additional, for any additional recruitment, the money won't go from center. It's the state's responsibility. But of the existing vacancies, the center would supposed to give resources through schemes. So we need to see the where the resources would be required. Teacher trainings you have mentioned. Teacher trainings already, I mean, teacher training has two components, in service and pre-service. If we look at the pre-service education, the kind of teacher training institutions required, the diets, the SCRT, everywhere there is huge shortage of faculty, both academic faculty and staff, non-staff, I'm sorry, I mean non-academic faculty and as well as academic faculty. So there is not resources going for firstly for the teacher training institutions. And when it comes to in-service teacher education, that already there was a very low financial norms, and over time that is being changed. Government is actually promoting online teachers training, but given the heterogeneity of the students, given the kind of different kinds of training required, whether it's mental health, whether it's wash or hygiene related, whether it's gender responsiveness among children, so different kinds of knowledge materials, modules and understanding required, and these are all. And then teachers training, if it is online, I mean, it's very difficult to actually the way we want to get the outcome, it would be difficult. So we need to put resources on these components, and that's why it's underutilization if is an issue, but that is actually coming from under allocation. Under allocation is actually leading to underutilization, and then it's further leading to under allocation because it's a vicious cycle. And when it comes to preschool education, there was thrust on the early childhood education and then foundational literacy and numeracy. And as NEP has mentioned, that there would be two channels. One is through schools or Ministry of Education, and one is through Anganwadi centers. So both Ministry of Education and Ministry of Women and Child Development have a significant role in offering early childhood care and education. Now, if we look at the MWCD budget, that is the scheme is Saksham Anganwadi and Poshan, through which actually are various kinds of interventions happening to the Anganwadi centers. It's not only about early childhood education or preschool education, it's also about the nutrition, it's also about referral services. But the budget, if we look at, then there is a decline from revised estimate. It was around 21,523 crore for the whole, the umbrella program, and it has decreased to 21,200 crore. So around 323 crore decline in the budget of Saksham Anganwadi and Poshan 2. And again, since it's an umbrella program, it's becoming difficult to get disaggregated budget data from union government. But since the whole budget is decreasing, it has impact on it will impact the ECC implementation. And for the ECC, one of the key components should be the training of Anganwadi workers, because the kind of knowledge and the kind of training is required to teach children, it's not very easy. In fact, it's the most difficult part. And then if there is proposal for, I mean, there was 6 months course, online course for preparing the Anganwadi workers, but that is not sufficient. And then through different channels, if we are providing preschool education and different kinds of different types of teachers are there, then it won't also, there will be a challenge in terms of quality in different places if we are not focusing adequately on the teachers training. This is related to preschool education, and if we look at the preschool education budget in the Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan across states, it is even less than 1%. I mean, even not that much, much lesser than that. So this is about the utilization and then scholarship. Yeah, I mean, there is data for the ministries, but yeah, as I have mentioned, mostly either there is a budget cut, or it's stagnant. Even that is true for the PM Research Fellowship. Even there is a budget cut we have seen in this budget. So yes, scholarship is a challenge. I mean, students are actually suffering. There is for a longer period of time demand for inflation indexed scholarship, but scholarship rates are not getting revised. And if there is a there is demand is much higher. The number of children or students are applying for scholarships, and the number of children getting the scholarship is there is a huge difference. But these are all demand driven schemes, but the outcome is, if there is lesser budget going for scholarships, then uh, there is a challenge for the students who are actually seeking this. Yeah, these are the
Yeah,
the
so now
yes.
let's move on to Anubha ji, and let's see how she would respond to the union interim budget, and so the provisions that it contains.
Thank you, Sinha sir. I would request Dr. Reddy to first,
Okay.
and then
Okay.
I'll
Okay, Dr. Reddy.
like to hear Mr. Reddy also.
Yeah.
Dr. Reddy.
I don't know why. Anubha, thank you. I don't know why you said that Reddy first. So kind of you that let me see. From my side, it is more kind of understanding, from the RT perspective, NEP perspective, So right to education has been there for quite some time, and more than a decade, and NEP has been there for last 3 years plus and kind of thing. And when I look at the budget, I look at the budget from these two perspectives, and also in between, the COVID also has come, and we know that how the schools were shut for more than 500 days, learning was stopped and kind of situation. So where the most of the government schools suffered because of lack of access to the digital devices or connectivity, or the content in the vernacular languages and a kind of thing. So these are the from these three angles, I look at the budget. This budget I see, though it is a interim budget, but it is an incremental budget. And overall, if you see, the budget has been increased from the 1.12 lakh crores to the 1.20 lakh crores. So it is an increase in terms of the 2023-24. But revised estimations of the 23-24, which was much more than the, especially school education, is almost all 1.29 lakh crores. It is actually reduction from the revised estimates to this current year's budget estimates. So that is a reduction there. At the same time, if it's a higher education budget, I'm talking about the 47,062 crores this year. But actually, 23-24 revised estimates of the budget is 57,000 plus crores. There are also reduction in the budget. So this is one observation. And second thing, when you see the allocations point of view, though as said, NEP is meant for all the schools, not for the selected schools and kind of thing. RT is meant for all the schools. I'm talking about government schools. When the Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan, SSA, this is as already Dr. Pravita already mentioned that this is the program. It is central government allocate a lot of resources to the state governments in forms of the different schemes and grants and kind of thing. Where this year the budget enhancement is just only 0.12%. So that is the NEP point of view, the RTE point of view, the very, very decimal allocation of the budget. At the same time, when you see allocation of three schemes, one is the PM Shri, the almost 48.15% increase, and PM Poshan is almost 7.48% increase, and Eklavya Model Schools almost a 7.80% increase. So these three schemes got the higher allocations. I am not saying that they should not get, they should get. At the same time, the allocation of the budget for the school education sector, it should be more than the what is been just only the 500 crores enhancement compared to the last year revenue estimates and this year budget estimates. So that is the one thing. At the same time, the higher education level. So one way you're talking about, especially the girls' enrollment has been increased to 28% last 10 years' time. And also the STEM education, 43% of the women are participating in, girls and women participating. So it requires some more budgeting for the higher education as well. But unfortunately, the UGC, especially UGC, which provides the grants to the most of the universities in the country, the UGC budget was reduced almost by 66%. So that is the biggest concern. And at the same time, the central universities, so which got a good amount of the enhancement of the budget around 4,000 crores. That is the good thing. And the centers of excellence, especially the artificial intelligence, I think centers, that is the one new, though it has been announced last year, but this year budget allocation around it got 250 crores budget allocation for that. And Professor, as you said already, you asked about from an again NEP perspective about the Anganwadi centers. So as we as an non-profit sector, we have been working for the promotion of the quality education in government schools across different states. At the same time, we also have been working with the Anganwadi centers. There is almost all 1:3 ratio. For one primary school is there are 3 Anganwadi centers are there. So when these children are coming to the school for the continuation of the education, unless until we address the preschool education or early childhood education at the Anganwadi center level, they come to the schools with a learning gap. So it is very much essential to address the issue at the starting level by addressing the gaps in the system. Unfortunately, the Anganwadi centers are the part of the Women and Child Welfare Department, and it is a part of the health and nutrition and preschool education. Within these 3 components, the preschool education is just neglected kind of thing. So where it requires allocation more budget, though the Saksham Anganwadi and Poshan scheme got a 3.14% enhancement, which is not at all sufficient to see to allocation for the Anganwadi where the preschool education you want to enhance. So, and again, say the digital transformation point of view, as a COVID situation point of view, most of the government schools on the ground, so it is the responsibility of the not just central government, but of the state governments as well, to how to equip these schools with a digital infra. That is one thing basic. NEP talks about the personalized learning and a kind of thing, talks about the future skills there in the secondary schools kind of thing. So from that perspective, these schools need to be equipped with the digital infrastructure, net connectivity, and the content in the local language, and the capabilities of the teachers, how to use the digital platform for the enhancement of education. So this requires not just allocation of the budget, it's a transformational kind of change you have to bring in. Otherwise, there is a huge gap between the private schools where they are moving ahead with these facilities and where the government schools are lagging. Here, the children who are studying there, they are missing the bus. The teachers who are teaching there, they are the people are left behind kind of situation. So it requires not incremental. It's a transformational allocation of the budget. How the caterpillar transforms to butterfly. So like that, if you want to bring the transformational change in the education system. So where we have to need those, how to see the 6% allocation of the budget from the GDP, that is focus. At the same time, see that to give them more the budget allocations for these schemes. Already, Dr. Pravita already mentioned about the scholarships was reduced, except the ST segment, which is slightly got enhancement, but other groups of the people whose scholarship skills were reduced. So I stop it here, and I'll add anything further later. Thank you, Professor.
So do you see, Dr. Reddy, that is there any provision to in fact enable or allocate resources to organizations which are providing, which are working with the government schools, like yours, in the area of early childhood education and so on and so forth. Because in the NEP there is a lot that has been talked about in the PPP model, and involving organizations, individuals, and so on and so forth. It doesn't get reflected in the budget. Is that so? I mean,
You are right, Professor. Actually, it is not reflecting. This is the purely allocation from the budget government point of view, how much government is allocating. And if you see this allocation of the budget at the ground level, if you see, this budget comes from the one is central government budget is coming there. Apart from that, the state education department, barring the Navodaya, Kendriya Vidya, Sainik schools, all those things, and especially the remaining government schools, fully funded by the fully means most majority of the contributions coming from the state education departments. That is one thing coming there. Apart from this, here in this case also we can see different parts of the country, different states. Some states are very proactively making contributions for the promotion of education. So wherever the central government and the states are leveraging the central government schemes, especially through Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan, and if the political will of the respective state, so they're adding more and utilizing the budgets of the SSA scheme, or the other one is called ROSA, again at a higher education level. So that is one thing happening ground level. Second thing, talking about the CSR budget. That is the CSR budget. Though CSR talks about the corporate social responsibility, it is almost 25,000 crores budget is coming to the CSR point of view, out of which health and education and skilling, the sanitation, these are the four segments attracting the more budget. And especially education budget is coming up there. It is coming more to the school education rather than the higher education. That is the one positive thing I'm talking about. Apart from that, some philanthropic contributions from the industrialists. There is another thing is happening there. The individuals, of course, it is happening sporadically here and there across the country, and that was school specific, not the more space kind of thing. So all these things are adding value to the education system, but nobody can replace the government. Government is the big, so we can't deny.
That's absolutely correct, but so can we say that, the looking at the interim budget and the kind of allocations that have been made, assuming that many other areas of education, components of education have remained either at the same level or they have received lower allocation, uh, and higher allocation for the population which perhaps would be using some of these resources. So one can say that, there is clearly a kind of the government has gone for, in the name of quality, it has gone for promoting more elite kind of an educational practices than perhaps, addressing things at the bottom. Because you see, if one has to reach I mean, this assumption that, we have already have universal enrollment would be wrong, because we all know that, there is a gap of, I mean, effectively, if you look at it in terms of the age composition, then, at the very 6 to 14, 6 to 10, there are nearly about 8 to 12% children who are yet not got an opportunity, and they're outside the schooling system. So, and then, we are also talking about, attaining a certain level of GER at the higher education level in another 10 years' time, which would be extremely difficult for us to achieve. So, and, the experience of the last 3 years following NEP and the current allocation, can we say that, this budget, especially from the point of view of the orientation of the budget, yes, it is strengthening science and technology, technological input through AI universities and all that, which will certainly lead to greater digitization. But then again, the gap between those who are the users and the technology would always be there. So can we say that this is more oriented towards helping the middle and the upper middle class and leaving the bottom 40% absolutely or 60% out of the picture?
Professor, actually, you can see that the education being being in the concurrent list, it is the
Yeah.
responsibility of both the central and the state governments. So when we talk about the addressing the gaps in the system, so in this process, so when you say centers of excellence, for example, the PM Shri schools. So there are around 14,600 schools we are talking about. So as per the NAP standards, these schools are being transformed over a period of time. That is the way the budget has been allocated. Yes, it is absolutely required to see that, to showcase that this is the way we can transform the schools as per the NAP's norms and standard. What are the ambitions, aspirations, kind of thing. The same thing, if you want to apply to the almost 15 lakh schools in the system across the country, how much resources it required. So here it is not just only the central government can allocate it, but at the same time, as I said, most of the schools, state government schools are run by the education department, respective states. The allocation of the budget has to happen both at central and state levels, like how the digital transformation happened, the online payments went on, the COVID situation happened there. So not only the payments and everything, try to see digital mode of delivery and kind of thing. Similarly, if you want to bring the revolutionary changes in the education system, where the today's context, the below poverty line, the lower middle class children from families, they are attending the government schools. So those who are affordable, they're sending kids to the private schools, they're taking care of. But those who are not affordable economically, and those who are socially disadvantaged groups, those who are remotely located people, they're fully depending on the government system, government schools. So if you want to bring the transformational change in those schools, so it requires the huge allocation of the budgets, not just from central government point of view, and the state governments as well. So that should be
that we understand that the much higher responsibility, if you look at it in terms of expenditure, I think the state government shoulder much greater responsibility, because that's most of the schools are run by them in the public sector. But then this also calls for yet another question, which I don't think can be answered at this stage, but it should be kept in mind for listeners, for viewers, that a much larger pool of out-of-school children are in areas or in states which are really lagging behind in various developmental parameters. And they also tend to suffer from lesser amount of resources that they could mobilize. And therefore, it will become a kind of a catch-22 position that, you have you have more burden of children to be taken to school, and you have lesser resources. You do not have the capacity to, in fact, meet those resources. So the gaps are likely to increase interregionally. Let's say, we have the state of Bihar at the bottom of it, vis-a-vis, say, other states which are doing much better financially, and they are proactively putting in greater amount of resources. And they would be the ones who would also be in a position to utilize the central allocations, much better than some of these states, because they do not have the capacity to mobilize such resources. So that would remain an important area, because yeah, Anubhaji, so I think we'll complete round one, and then we'll go on to the specific questions after you.
Yes, thank you, Professor Sinha. And actually, this is a very important discussion. And last year also, I was a part of this discussion and got to know a lot of things from all the panelists, learned panelists. So basically, see what I would see, what I have seen this budget, no doubt, they have increased the budget as far as school education is concerned. And as far as UGC is concerned, we know that they have reduced the budget. Yes, but for deemed universities and central universities, there is an increase. but I would first go with the school education part. See, as far as budget is concerned, if we can see the policy, first the RT was implemented, RT was enacted, and it came into force in the year 2010. So it's almost more than 13 years that the RT is not yet being implemented properly in our country. RT is like right to education, right to free education for each and every child. Now, after RT, they have come up with another scheme, which is Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan in 2018. That also is equally like Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan and RT is one and the same thing, just the name they have changed. So the RT implementation is still lagging behind. We have children there are many children who they are out of school today. So we could not implement RT in last 13 years properly. Be it whatever will be the reason, I don't know, the budget allocation and whatever will be the reason, we could not implement RT properly since 2013 till date. So since 2010 till date, RT is not being implemented. Now next is the Samagra Shiksha that has come in the year 2018. And it's almost 5 years that has still not being implemented. Now we have this NEP in 2020, and now it's almost 3 years. And NEP is also every year they're giving budget allocation for implementation of NEP. I don't know whether now Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan and NEP will be implemented or not in next 10 years or so. First part is Right to Education Act that has not been implemented. Now they have come up with Samagra Shiksha, now NEP. So it is one and the same thing. They have just changed the name. My request to the government would be that whatever budget they are allocating, even if they're saying that 90% of the budget has been utilized, whether the same has been utilized properly or not, we don't know. If out of whatever, say 1,000 or 1 lakh crore budget was given for last year or maybe 2020 or 22, whether we have utilized that 90% properly or not, there is no doubt. Last year, 7,000 crore money went unutilized. It was not utilized properly in the year 2023. Last year also, we spoke about the unutilized amount that was maybe around 3,000 or 4,000. I don't remember the figure. But this year, around 7,000 crore could not be utilized. But what about the 93% or 95%, whatever amount has been utilized, whether the same has been utilized properly or not? Because I could not see anything happening on ground. Where is that money gone? Children are still out of school. How many teachers have been trained properly in last 2 years? Do we have any data properly, whether the teachers have been properly trained or not? Whatever amount has been utilized, whether the teachers have been trained properly in last 2-3 years or not since 2020? I don't think teachers have been properly trained. And we still are lagging behind as far as the training part is concerned. Teachers are not being trained properly. If we don't have a proper teachers, be it at Anganwadi level or primary school or secondary school or even higher education, if we don't have proper teachers, properly trained teachers, I don't think we will be in a position to implement any scheme, be it RTE or be it this NEP or Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan. Teacher training is a very important and crucial thing in this whole education sector. Until unless we have properly trained teacher, I don't know how many teachers have been trained till date. So it will be very difficult to implement these schemes even for the 5 years down the line or maybe 10 years down the line. So everything is on paper. It looks very good. Budget looks very good. Yeah. They have allocated so much funds for so many schemes. But whether the implementation is happening on ground or not, I could not see. Many children are out of school. How many have been again brought back to school? We don't have the proper data. If you will ask the education department, you will file RTI, you will not get any reply. They don't have proper data for the same. So yes, we are talking on various forums, on social media, news channels. Everybody is talking about this budget. Yeah, this is a good budget. I am also saying, yeah, budget is very good, no doubt. But whether the implementation is happening, whether the utilization of the funds are happening or not at ground level or not, that is a very important part. Now, second, this year, as far as medical colleges are concerned, I will appreciate the government that since many years, students have been struggling to get admission in most of the colleges because as far as NEET exam is concerned, more than 18 lakh children take part in that exam. More than 18 lakh children. Out of 18 lakh, there are hardly 90,000 seats. Yeah. Until unless we have proper seats, proper medical college, children will not get education as far as medical education is concerned, because it is medical education is out of budget. And some private schools and universities, they're charging more than 50 lakhs for 50 lakhs or 1 crore also for this 5-year course. So one part which I liked about this budget is that yes, they are increasing the number of colleges, the number of universities. They are going to increase the number of colleges as far as medical colleges are concerned. That is a very good step, where they are utilizing the existing infrastructure. So they don't have to spend much taxpayers' money. They don't have to spend much on increasing the number of medical colleges in our country, because they are utilizing the existing infrastructure. Same thing should be done even for the school education. We are seeing that even Professor Sinha was discussing that many of the government schools have been shut down. Why government is shut down? Why government is doing that? If government is shutting down government schools in every state, Maharashtra government, even this Haryana government, many governments, they are shutting down the existing government schools. So instead of shutting down government schools, if government will utilize the infrastructure and through PPP model, if we will convert those existing government schools which they are going to shut down, or they have already closed those schools, if through PPP model we could we could again enhance the infrastructure of that school, we could convert it into maybe central board or other boards also, not state board, because nowadays many children are more interested in joining schools which are central board and which are affiliated to CBSE and ICSE and other boards. In Maharashtra, what is happening in the last few years, what I have seen, in Maharashtra, government is now converting the existing, like BMC, I will give example of BMC in Mumbai. The existing municipal schools are being converted to central schools and even IB boards and ICSE boards. So this way, if each and every state and even with support from central government, we will convert the existing schools which they're planning to shut down to central schools and maybe Sainik school and other Kendriya Vidyalayas, because it is really difficult to open new schools. If we can utilize existing infrastructure and convert the schools which the governments are planning to shut down to central schools, then definitely many children will come back and they will join the schools. So we have to focus basically first on teacher training. Secondly, how to bring back those children who are now out of school. Because after secondary education, most of the children, they don't study. They don't get proper education. So if we are focusing on improving the digital, as far as digital India is concerned, if we are focusing on improving the infrastructure as far as IT is concerned, but yes, due to digital divide, many children will be out of that scheme. Because in most of the villages, it will be very difficult to implement or to bring them in loop with the existing infrastructure. The children in villages will not get proper access to internet because they don't have proper electricity only. Until you will focus on electricity, जब तक घर घर लाइट नहीं पहुंचेगी तो इंटरनेट तो पहुंच ही नहीं सकता. That is the major concern. So it will definitely take a lot of years, maybe another 10 years will take as far as the digital India is concerned. There is digital divide and that is going to increase also. It will not happen in maybe 5 years or 10 years down the line. It will take a lot of years. So what we can focus is on, we should increase the infrastructure, improve the infrastructure of the existing schools, maybe in a remote area or maybe in any urban area. The schools are being shut down even in Mumbai, in Delhi, in Haryana. There are major cities where the government is shutting down government schools. They are not giving aid to aided schools. Aided universities are also not getting aids. Since last year, they have reduced the budget for the UGC. So even this year also, they have reduced. Many professors and many universities are facing problem because the government is not giving aid to the aided universities. So how are you going to, now you're investing more on universities. Instead of investing more on universities, you should, and existing universities and schools and colleges, government should focus more on increasing the infrastructure of the existing schools and universities. If you're not providing aid to aided schools, if you're not providing aid to aided universities, and instead of that, you're allocating funds for opening up new universities, new schools. So that will take a lot of time and funds also. So what I'm saying that 90% fund that which has been utilized last year and last 2 years also, 90% or 95% funds have been utilized, but that has not been utilized properly. So existing infrastructure, if we will focus on improving the existing infrastructure of the existing schools and colleges and universities, then definitely within few years we will see a lot of change in our education sector. We will just have to focus and invest more on teacher training. Instead of investing more on infrastructure, the allocation should have been on improving the quality of education. So we should invest more in training the teachers instead of investing in building more universities, more schools and colleges. The government should invest more on teacher training. As far as the existing schools are and universities are concerned, aided universities, especially government should provide aid to those universities, and those which are shut down, they can again restart those schools and universities on the basis of PPP model. So PPP should be promoted, no doubt, but at ground level, as I said, Professor Reddy also said that at ground level, Anganwadis and again schools are not getting proper aid from the government, be it central or state government. So until unless we get proper support from the government, be it central and state government, I don't think it will be very easy to implement any kind of scheme, be it RTE, be it Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan, SSA, or even NEP. It will take another maybe 2 decades or 3 decades, I don't know how many years, because now children are facing a lot of problem as far as primary education is concerned, and even in higher education, children and students are facing a lot of problem because the fees has gone high. Many of the universities are conducting exam, but most of the children, 80%, I don't know the proper figure, but I'm saying that more than 80 or 90% students are struggling to get admission in good universities because the fees of these universities, especially the private universities, because most of the aided universities are not doing well because they're not getting aid. So children, as far as school is concerned, they're out of school or they're not able to afford the education in primary and other schools. Similarly, as far as colleges are concerned, students are not getting admission in the universities or the colleges, which are well established and well known colleges. So जहाँ तक education की बात है, हम देखेंगे right from KG to PG, most of the children are not getting affordable education because the government is not investing the money, taxpayers' money properly. They're investing in increasing interest. They're investing in mostly the infrastructure part. But if they will invest as far as in the existing infrastructure, existing aided schools, aided universities, then definitely government students will also get proper education, affordable education. आप देखेंगे 2022 का भी जो budget था, that was focused mostly on affordable education. Government was focusing more on affordable education, affordability of education, which is still a major concern for, I would say, 90% of the students and children in our country. So if we will focus more on providing education, like RTE jaise tha, what I say that the education should be imparted from KG to PG, the education should be affordable. Then only we can talk about Skill India and other programs. Skill India also is a very good scheme, no doubt, but that has also not been implemented properly. Because I'll give you one example of apprenticeship program by SBI, and we went to High Court. We have challenged that apprenticeship program by the Skill India, under the Skill India scheme. We have challenged that in High Court, Bombay High Court, because many of the trainees, many of the apprentices, they said that we have not been trained properly. So under Skill India, if government is saying that more than 1.5, I don't know the figures, Professor Kundu would be knowing, under Skill India, maybe I don't know how many have been trained in last 1 year. So suppose the figure is around 1.5 crore or 1.5 lakhs, if they have trained more than 1.5 lakh trainees under Skill India program. there are many apprentices, many trainees who have approached the High Court, cases are pending, and there are many who could not approach anywhere. They don't have money also. So Skill India program also has not been properly implemented in our country. On paper, they are showing that, yes, we have trained so many youth. But as far as the trainees are concerned, I'm giving you the example of the apprenticeship program by SBI, where the more than 3,000, I think, apprentices have been trained. But they themselves have challenged that we could not get proper training. That was just on paper that we have to write. And they have given all the exam, they have cleared the exam, but as far as the training is concerned, that was not imparted properly. I don't know what about the other sectors. I'm just giving you the example of banking sector. In banking sector, the trainees could not get, apprentices could not get proper training under the internship, under the apprenticeship program run by SBI under this Skill India scheme. So that is also, I don't know how much the Skill India program has been implemented, whether the training and has been imparted properly or not, because see, assessment and evaluation are very important as far as Skill India is concerned. As per the Skill India scheme is concerned, until unless there is proper assessment and evaluation to train the trainees and to assess the trainees, until unless we have proper assessment in place to check the proficiency and competency of these individuals, I don't think that we could say that we have imparted training to so many XYZ number of students or trainees. So that assessment is also not happening, whether there is any monitoring scheme or not for the implementation, for monitoring all these schemes. I don't know whether there is any monitoring committee being set up, or there is any monitoring body which is being set up to assess whether the schemes, whether it is for Skill India, whether it is for Samagra Shiksha, whether it is for NEP or for any other schemes which the government is promoting, whether there is any proper monitoring scheme, a monitoring committee to monitor whether all these schemes have been implemented or not. As far as I am concerned, whatever knowledge I have through those who are connected to me, I know that the government has failed as far as RT is concerned. They could not implement it properly in last 13 years. Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan, again, that has not been implemented properly as far as the people who are connected to me, I know from them. Data is different what the government is showing. Now NEP again, NEP, whether it has been implemented or not, we all have seen in last 3 years, teachers training is not happening properly. I don't know if Madam Kundu, Professor Kundu would be having any data, but I don't have any such data, whether how many teachers have been properly trained. Online training is happening, as Professor Kundu said, but that will not help. So proper training is also important, and proper implementation of these schemes will happen on ground only when we will have a proper monitoring body. So that is what I would request, that we should emphasize more on the monitoring body, monitoring committee, or monitoring committee to be set up of the individuals, or maybe NGOs can be a part of that monitoring body, and we can monitor whether the utilization is happening properly or not. 90% funds have been utilized, but that 90% also has been utilized or not properly, that is a major concern. Unutilized is okay, 5% or 10% remains unutilized, but as far as utilization is concerned, whether that is happening properly or not. मुझे लग रहा है ground level पे तो वो properly utilization is not happening. And other part is that budget allocation, which we all have been discussing, that we have been demanding that at least 6% should be allocated for this education sector, right from KG to PG. So that 6% is a huge number, and until unless government will properly allocate budget for this sector, education sector, because we need resources, we need people who will come forward, because there are a lot of NGOs who are working, there are a lot of companies who are working, and there are a lot of associations who are working for improving the quality of education, but that is not happening properly on ground level because they are not getting funds. So until unless we have proper budget, at least 6%, we will not be in a position to provide affordable education from KG to PG. So that is a very challenging task. Government allocates 6% budget, at least 3% or 4%. Then with proper implementation of all these schemes and a monitoring body, then definitely in few years down the line, maybe 5 years or 10 years, we could see that all these schemes will be implemented at ground level properly. So those were my points, and we'll see, we'll add more points once.
Yeah, we are left with
So
just about 15 minutes to, less than 15 minutes for the remaining part of your point is well taken. Monitoring is essential, and that's very important. I think, part of the answer could come from, taking a look at, and this is my question to, not a question, I would like Protiva to come and enlighten us on this question. Every year the government of India brings about a kind of an analysis of budgetary expenditure on education, budgeted expenditure on education, which is in fact taking the states and the center together. So what is your reading of the expenditure in the last? That's what was one of the issues that Anubha was trying to raise, as to whether the money is being spent properly, and whether it is reaching the targeted population, or whether it is in a position to transform the infrastructure in a manner that it could perhaps help a transformation of the entire educational system. Teachers training, she raised a very, very important point. So therefore, I think monitoring part and teachers training, which we all know that teachers training has taken a back seat, although it should be at the forefront. And what do we get from the analysis of budgeted expenditure on education in the last 3-4 years? I believe, the last report was for 2021 or 21-22, if I'm not wrong. That's what I had seen. So, yeah, Protiva, if you can help me.
So, sir, the analysis of budgeted expenditure on education is a very important publication that way, because it gives, like National Health Account, it also tries to give all the expenditure incurred by union government as well as state governments, and it's around 40 ministries and departments, whoever in which form is spending towards education. So it gives a comprehensive picture of education spending or education allocation. And basically, when we talk about 6% of GDP for as public spending, here we not only talk about Ministry of Education, but all the ministries and departments. The only challenge with this publication is, as you have mentioned, that the latest document available is 2021 BE.
Yeah.
So many of the changes that after NEP has come, many of the changes are actually happened after that. But if we look at the pattern that has been shared in the analysis of budgeted expenditure, there again we can see that as of now, it's, if we go by 2021 BE figure, then it's around 4.14% of GDP is being at this stage is going for public education, and of which around 1%, 1.1% is from union government and rest is from states. But if we take the actual expenditure data which is available for 2019-20, sorry, 18-19, then it is even less than 4% at this stage.
Yeah, it's about 3.7 or 3.8. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And another challenge, I think, it's a very important publication, but in this publication, since not the way the disaggregated data is available, so there are for the purpose of estimation, a number of assumptions that the Department of Higher Education, this publication is from Department of Higher Education, they needs to carry it out. And some of that time we have noticed that the data given based on the estimation with different assumptions, and then the actual reality is different. So
Yeah.
maybe there is a time a need also for revisiting the basically the process.
Yeah.
But other than that, when when this particular publication, the way they present the information, it's again in line of the functional classification that has been followed in the budget. So if we actually like to know, like it's more like, suppose I'm talking about elementary education, then it's like primary schools, non-government primary schools, non-government primary schools, this kind of category of, and within that, what exactly more disaggregated picture is not possible to, come out. So with at that level of aggregation. So yeah, but at the same time, it's very important because we don't get, whenever even we look at the detailed demand for grants for different departments, we don't get that kind of minute data. For example, finance ministry, how much they are spending on education, rail ministry, how much they are spending on education. So they somehow, the department try to capture all those kinds of information. So it's
Right.
an important publication.
And what is happening with the Skill India? Can we have either Dr. Suresh or Protiva or anybody throwing some light on Skill India? Because that's where, the entire discussion is that, we are not producing employable graduates from colleges and so on and so forth. So what's really happening with Skill India?
I have quick 1 minute
Yeah.
comment on this, Professor. Regarding the Skill India, as per the budget speech, also the finance minister mentioned that so far we have trained 1.5 crores of youth in the Skill India, the newly trained people, and also 54 lakh people, they are upskilled or reskilled. So this has happened so far. But a Skill India point of view, especially you're talking about school to work, and those who are higher education to the already those in industry also. So the society is changing so drastically, and whatever the skills the people have today, they may be after 5-10 years time, they're not going to be useful at all. So that's why I call it future skills, talking about, especially STEM education point of view, the future skills, how one can promote the future skills in the school by currently the beyond school curriculum. Currently, school curriculum is more kind of studying of the regular traditional subjects like languages and history, math, science, social studies like that. They are there. They are essential. They are the core. Apart from that, how we can create the opportunities for the children and the educators at the school level itself. So now, assuming that the children of class 6 now, they can become, by the time they enter into the market, after 5, 6, 7 years kind of time. So whatever today the society, the market is there, it won't be the same market after 7 years of time. So anticipating those changes in advance and prepare our children to be able to move into the market in a right manner and kind of thing. For that purpose, the future skills, though of course government is doing something through the Niti Ayog, there is a Atal Innovation Mission, we're setting up the Atal Tinkering Labs at the school level. At the same time, outside the school, there is a lot of digital academies set up by the private industries, plus the government point of view, ITIs. There are 3,000 ITIs have been set up by the government as per today's budget also they're talking about. So there is a more focus, emphasis has been given for the Skill India. But when I say the making things happen, that is the challenge. So it may happen in the metropolitan cities, tier 2, tier 3 towns kind of thing, especially the people coming from the rural background, the less privileged background, how they can be equipped not only the hard skills of the technical, the different areas, but also the soft skills. So which is required to enter the job market. Those who are already there, how we can equip them in the reskilling and upskilling and kind of thing. It is a huge requirement. Yes, the efforts are there in that direction, but it requires more consolidation efforts, from every aspect, from every angle.
So that means, what you were saying is that, we need to really bring about more synergy between, say, the objectives and the practices of the Skill India.
Yes.
We should get grounded in the upper primary level itself, so
Yes.
that means, there is a need for much greater transformation in the nature of schools that we already have. So setting up a lab here or there, will that help, or it has to be mainstreamed into the curriculum? What Gandhi ji used to say, basic तालीम, वो जो पर्सपेक्टिव था कि भाई अब गांव में तो वो पहले हम थोड़ा सा खेती भी सीखते थे, थोड़ा वो सब करते थे, वो सब तो करिकुलम से बाहर हो गया। अब जब हम स्किल को लाना चाह रहे हैं स्कूलों में, तो उसके लिए जो इन्वेस्टमेंट चाहिए वो तो डिपार्टमेंट ऑफ एजुकेशन ही करेगा, चाहे स्टेट लेवल पे करे, चाहे यूनिवर्सिटी, चाहे वो यूनियन लेवल पे करे। तो उसका प्रोविजन कहाँ है इस बजट में? वो ठीक है, हमने 1.5 करोड़ लोगों को ट्रेन कर दिया, लेकिन उसका प्रोविजन है क्या? क्या ये हम कैन वी से दैट देयर इज सम काइंड ऑफ a link between, say, the ministry on the one hand, Ministry of Education, and the Ministry of the Ministry of Labor, Ministry of Industry, and Child and Women Care. I mean, these four ministries will have to join hands in order to make something of this sort happen.
Yeah, this Skill India is which is more kind of interconnected with various ministries that you, as you said, Professor.
Yeah.
Especially as I mentioned about Ministry of Small and Medium Enterprises,
Yeah.
Industrial Ministry, and also the Niti Aayog, the Higher Education Department of the Higher Education Department in the Ministry of Education, and also the School Education Department. So there are many players are here. But especially in the school education department, the three things are happening. One is that National Apprentice Training Scheme, which is allocating around 600 crores budget during this 24-25 budget. There was an increase of 160 crores compared to the 23-24 budget. There is one thing I can say here. Regarding the future skills point of view, school education point of view, there is no such specific thing. Maybe PMC schools may something they can think of, they can do that. But otherwise, through Niti Aayog, there are 10,000 schools across the country so far. These ATL labs have been set up across the country. So that is happening. And also Niti Aayog was thinking of going forward, setting up the PPP model. So industry and Niti Aayog and government can three together can collaborate on this part. That's happening. Apart from that, some companies on their own as part of the CSR, they're all setting up of this kind of future skills labs in the schools, collaborating with the CBSC, collaborating with the various state education departments. It is happening there, but it requires much more than what is currently happening.
True, true. And therefore, we require not only greater synergy, but greater allocations also.
Yes.
And greater monitoring,
Yes.
which in fact was one of the major points that Anubha ji was saying. In fact, when it comes to monitoring, why are we happy just with the parliamentary monitoring? The practices of, say, a review of schemes from time to time, and also, it used to be the practice, especially during the 5-year planning period, there used to be midterm appraisal. There used to be, such appraisals were taking place, which I think, fell out of practice from 10th plan onwards or 11th plan onwards. I have not seen any interim, scheme-wise interim review. But it needs to be emphasized, because if we don't have planning, but we have all these schemes, and therefore, if we want to make sense out of it, so that, that could perhaps, inform our policies in the coming years, I think, these reviews are very important, and these monitorings are very important. So, one final round from everybody. So let's start with Protiva, and then we'll like to conclude because it's past 4:30 already. Yeah.
Thanks, sir. So, there is one question I have seen in the chat box related to Gender Inclusion Fund.
Yeah.
I just would like to make a point that during NEP, it has been mentioned that there would be government would form a gender inclusion fund, and the money will go for different purposes, especially for the women and transgender students. Depending on the local needs, the money would be spent. But in our recent Lok Sabha questions, there are so many times Lok Sabha questions have asked about the status of Gender Inclusion Fund, and it has been shared that uh, some of the interventions are taking place through Samagra Shiksha Abhijan, like the Kasturba Gandhi Balika Vidyalaya, like the scholarship for girls scholarship. Girls students with disabilities, they are getting scholarship, or self-defense of girl children in schools, or uniform. So these are kind of the interventions that has been there, and the Samagra Shiksha Abhijan, it has been reported mainly as part of Gender Inclusion Fund. And when it comes to, I would like to say only one thing, that since I working on the, looking at data, looking at the budget, my only realization is that if there is proper planning, then the planning could follow budgeting, and then that could actually give a better implementation. And in this planning process, there is need for gender responsiveness, there is need for child responsiveness. The students are different, no, it's not homogeneous community, so we need to keep the inclusivity lens in the whole process. Otherwise, the ultimate outcome, the way we are actually looking at it, won't be possible. And the second point I would like to say, its learning outcome is very important, and over time the different surveys are showing that poor learning outcomes, and it has been also a narrative has been is there that there is no more, there is not adequate. It's not the case that there is not money. It's not the case that there is need for putting resources to input. But still, I believe the states are not at level playing field. The inputs like teachers training, teacher training institutions, these are the areas where resources would be required, and these are inputs that can only, even basic infrastructure, and especially the new challenges like climate change. We need now climate resilience infrastructure. The schools are not much equipped. So there is still need for putting resources towards input. So to make an enabling environment, and that will automatically lead to better learning outcomes.
So, Dr. Reddy, your final point before we close.
Yeah, just Professor, just I thought of, instead of incremental approach, we have to follow the transformational approach with a lot of political will to bring the change in the system.
Yeah, that's a very important point. Anubhaji?
From my side, see, one point I missed as far as the disabled children are concerned. I don't know how much government is focusing on those children, because there are many parents who are concerned about the disabled children, right from KG to PG, where whether we are focusing more on disabled children or not. That point I missed. And from my end, I would just say that, yes, no doubt government is doing its best. And as a citizen, we also should come forward, and whatever queries and are there, we should keep conducting such sessions, and also raise objection as far as the implementation of all these schemes are concerned, and budget allocation is concerned. That has to be increased. They have increased, no doubt, but we need more funds to implement all these schemes, be it Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan, or maybe RTE, or maybe the NEP. So whichever schemes are there, proper
That's
implementation
correct.
and monitoring.
One final point, which I think I'll ask Protiva again. When you were talking about cess, do we have any analysis of the education cess? Because if I remember about 4 or 5 years ago, what I read that much of education cess was not spent. Now if 70% on school education is coming from the education cess, you have 1/3 of university education is coming from the cess. then the burden, what is the union government taking the burden of? I mean, what is its responsibility? I mean, this is the citizens who are paying through education cess, over and above the taxes, So this is yet another important point, because this is quite peculiar to the education sector, isn't it?
Yes.
And second point, which I think, which needs to be emphasized here, is what is the synergy between, say, PM Shri as a school, which will be a school of excellence, and there can be, not every school is a PM Shri school. There are selected model schools, kind of a thing. What Kothari had referred is a pace setting in schools. We started with model schools. We started with all these kinds of selective areas of excellence. But they failed in terms of, connecting with the rest of the schools in terms of whatever innovations that they were trying to bring about, because they all stood by themselves. There was hardly any kind of a give and take between, say, one PM3 school. Although, in the NEP, they are talking about what you call cluster approach, and that, one school, which will be the higher secondary school, will have several attached schools and will be governed by the same council or the board or the headmaster, So will that really bring about that kind of a synergy, so that, there is pedagogical level, what Suresh Reddy ji was saying, that, we have to really think about transforming the whole educational landscape. So how does this happen, and how will it happen? And do we have adequate provisioning for that in the budget? Yeah, so these are the last two questions, and then we will sum it up. I think, Rahmat is taking note of it. I'm an old person. I keep forgetting. Yeah.
Sir, about the education says, as I mentioned, the primary education says getting collected from 2005-6 and secondary one 2006-7, and says purpose is always for a select period, for a specific purpose one can collect says, but it's more than 20 years. I mean, around 20 years we are depending on say. Yeah. Now, primary education says is always kept there under Prarambhik Shiksha course. There is a specific dedicated fund was there, but secondary and higher secondary education says that fund was not there for a longer period of time. Now, in around 2018-19, I could be wrong with the figure, but the year, the Madhyamik and Uchitara Shiksha course, like one dedicated fund has been created. But at the same time, fund has been created, but that fund was not actually getting allocated or for different purposes. This is a very recent I mean, incidents that the money is getting Madhyamik and Uchitar Shiksha course say fund is going for different purposes, like even for Skill India program, it's getting financed through MASK or Madhyamik Uchitar Shiksha course. Now, yeah, that is the whole point. So when government is saying that it has able to increase its tax revenue and will in further there is a scope of further increase, then why the education is not getting supported through gross budgetary support, but says, right. And since the says and such money is not being, the devolution not happened of this money to the states. So states needs to given the matching demands for different schemes that states are putting, that they need to share from their gross budgetary support. So this demand for sharing of says money with states to the Finance Commission for a longer period of time, this demand and this policy ask is there. But yeah, even then, if we look at the Comptroller and Auditor General's report or the of sales, we have seen the around, I mean, in last report, we have seen that around 40% of sales money is lying with consolidated fund. I mean, it has not been used for the specific purpose that has been collected. So, yeah, these are the challenges there. The other question, I think Professor Reddy and Dr. Reddy can take up. Thanks.
Yeah. Regarding this, it is not about just only the cluster of schools development like the PMC's kind of school. As per the RTE, it talks about, NEP talks about, if you want to bring the transformation change in the system, it requires efforts both at national level and the state level. National level, it gives the policy framework. RTE is an act and NEP is a policy document. To make it realize on the ground, as said, education is a concurrent subject at different state level, state education department has to bring the structural changes, adjustments. If you want to see that a cluster of schools where the one high school supported by the 3-4 upper primary schools, there are the 10-15 primary schools, there is a 30 Anganwadi centers. It's like a pyramid. So where in this pyramid, if you talk about the Anganwadi centers are part of WCD, and the primary schools and the high schools, depending upon the different states, they have different structures also there. So the state level, they have to bring the policy change that this is how we are restructuring the school system in our state and kind of thing, aligning with the Anganwadi centers there. And there will be a nodal school and resources.
Oh, I think there's a power failure, maybe a temporary power failure at Dr. Reddy's place. So, okay, I think, I must thank the panelists on behalf of IMPRI. And
Sorry to
if
interrupt.
Rahmat would like to sum it up, I'll hand over the floor to Rahmat.
Yes, sir. So we also had a question as well. So there have been like a record number of students going abroad for higher education. I think alone last year, the US Embassy issued around 140,000 US student visas. So how do government policies
So I think,
or
we have got Professor Reddy back now. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, Dr. Reddy, yes. We lost you because there was some kind of a power failure, perhaps at your place. Dr. Reddy, can you hear us? You have to, perhaps, we can't hear you. We can't hear you, Dr. Reddy. Maybe, there is some problem. Yeah, so you go ahead. Rahmat, you go ahead.
Yes, sir. So I was asking, we had a question. So a record number of students are going abroad for higher education over the past few years. So how do government policies or the budget address this problem? Or do they specifically address it?
Yeah, so who would like to answer this question? Yeah, maybe. I'm not personally equipped to answer this question. I can tell you that. Yeah. Protiva, would you like to come in and answer this question, or Professor Reddy?
No, I am not equipped, but one of the reasons, lower allocation towards higher education, it's impacting the different public universities. So those who have money, they are going to and looking for good education, going to the private universities, or the fees are such so high that many of are actually opting to go further and going abroad. But there is some scholarships for to support studying abroad. Some of the
That's very
scholarships are there.
minimum.
But that's very minimal, and very
absolutely a
few beneficiaries are there under those schemes. But other than that, I don't have much knowledge.
Yeah, but even in our own universities, you see, and colleges, what has happened is that in the last 10, 15 years, or maybe this process began much earlier, when, the universities and colleges were asked to mobilize their resources. Bajal Commission report was there, committee report was there, and after that, there was some kind of a mobilization through the UGC. What we have seen is that there are paid courses along with in the government colleges. You have add-on courses which are paid courses, and that has become one of the biggest sources of income. I know of several colleges in Delhi University. They are meeting their infrastructure needs only from those funds. there is hardly anything coming from the government, right? The point that Anubhaji was saying, that we need to have more resources coming to these colleges, existing ones, aided colleges, and they are starving because the government is not giving them funds. So one is that there is an infrastructure crunch. Um, Another that even in public institutions, the education is becoming costlier. Say, for example, I mean, Delhi University isn't the only example. If you go to, say, Allahabad University or BHU, which are the central universities, you will find that the tuition fees have gone up. The hostel maintenance fees and everything has gone up by leaps and bounds. So it's beyond the reach of what Anubhaji was talking about, affordable education. The education doesn't remain affordable at all, particularly for those who come from the economically marginalized sections. So, so it's basically, Rahmat, your question is about those who come from the well-off families, those who have got some kind of a contact abroad. Uh, I mean, they're all going out because there is a much greater uh, expectation that once they will complete the course, they will have some job somewhere. But the graduate unemployment in India is perhaps one of the worst in the world at the moment. So that and this has consistently been there for nearly about several years. I would say more significantly after, I do not know the relationship, but after the demonetization. I mean, it has been on a rise because that demonetization did lead to several small and medium enterprises closing down for whatever reason, and so on and so forth. I mean, the economic survey gives us some data on that. So economic census, not survey. So I think that's it, and this trend will go on and on because they are. I believe the inequality of income is also becoming wider. There are rich who are becoming richer. There is very little percolation downwards, and therefore there would always be a tendency for them to move out. But I think public education should not bother so much about that. It should rather address the question of the lower middle and the lower classes, because that is where, everybody pays taxes. Everybody buys a packet of Bharat ka namak, Desh ka namak, and everybody pays the same tax as the rich and the poor. So therefore, everybody has a right to, in fact, have a share of the taxes, whether it is I mean, they're not, it's the state's responsibility to, in fact, encourage public education. Nowhere in the world, even the countries like United States of America, I mean, they spend much higher amount on public education. I mean, and there at least more than 96% of children go to public schools, that speaks volumes of how public schools are being maintained. The whole idea that massification of education means decline of standard is a bogus argument, which is only a fiction of imagination for the elite classes. Because I would say, I mean, I'm sorry if I say this, but there is this a class bias that only some are meant to be excellent and others are not born to be excellent. I mean, this is a caste society in which we all have this kind of an mentality. I think it's too late, but sooner we get rid of this mentality, it would be better. So I think let me thank all the panelists for their time, and Professor Reddy, we missed you somewhere in between because there was a power failure. But I think for all the important points that you made, I do understand this is time for us to think ahead and think in terms of transformation. That's well taken, but we can't transform unless until we connect with the ground. That's also very important. The
So I have
connection
another
with the
question.
reality. Yeah.
So, with regards to the Viksit Bharat and Vishwa Guru goals, the specific focus on education and research and development, Is there any stress in the budget towards developed India by 2047, so the 100-year goal?
Yeah, Protiva, what is Bharat? क्या आपने कहा विश्व गुरु? I don't. That's first of all, this Vishwa Guru or is a nice political slogan. But nobody should be even assuming that we could be or anybody can in the world. I mean, we are talking in terms of a global coexistence. So everybody has the same right and same aspiration. We should all exchange our knowledge. Knowledge is not limited to the territory of a country. The knowledge cannot be contained within the boundary. So therefore, if the world, if we establish a kind of a framework where there is a frequent and a continuous exchange of ideas across the boundary, within our own, I think, in the neighborhood, I think that would become much more important for us to, deal with the situation, because South Asian situation is very, very unique in certain respects. So I think, we should be in a position to join hands with the South Asian countries in terms of exchange of knowledge and so on and so forth, so that, we could tackle the problems on the ground, yeah, but anything else about excellence and about becoming Vishwaguru, I really do not have any idea. I mean, because these are political slogans. I mean, I don't think, we can never pretend to be. I mean, because the gaps between the developed parts of Europe, say the Scandinavian countries, and us in terms of, say, the values of democracy, the values of coexistence, the values of gender equality, we got to do a lot of unlearning in order to, in fact, even reach that level. So therefore, I don't think from the budget, this can be answered. But it certainly shows the direction in which the government is thinking. The government thinks that, we can have certain excellence, centers of excellence, through the kind of a framework of the clusters that they are trying to form. Similarly, they are also thinking in terms of having exclusive education zones for deprived children. So I think these are important landmark events that when it unfolds, it will certainly have some impact. It's still too early for us to, in fact, say as to what is going to happen, or whether it is the business as usual. So the bottle is changed, but the wine remains the same old wine. But the old wine, I'm told, is good.
Rightly, Professor. And just one point, just I want to add, as a part of the higher education department budget, there is a
Yeah.
Institute of Eminence of World Class.
Yeah.
Yes.
It has been enhanced from 1,500 crores to 1,800 crores. That means 300 crores more added there. That is the one thing I can talk about. But it's not only thing for the, it leads to the world excellence kind of thing. Just of sharing that. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. Bit by bit, we'll I mean, this would certainly have impact on other institutions as well. But it's very important that what is the conception of this world-class institution? It's going to be a world-class institution in the way the global society or the global economy would like us to see, or whether it's going to be a world-class university which is going to respond to the national needs. That's where the bigger question is located. Yeah, anything else, Rahmat, that is coming from the floor among the participants? No?
Nothing else. Nothing else.
Okay. So, yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Reddy, Dr. Kundu, and Anubha ji, and Rahmat for being with us and helping us with this entire session. And if you would like to summarize, Rahmat, or we take it as summarized?
No, so I was actually going to invite you if you had any closing remarks to give, but
No, I think, the closing remarks have been, I mean, they are there, I mean, we have had a lot of exchange on different issues. Yeah, the closing remark would be that, we need to, in fact, put the emphasis on public education. There is no way that we can escape that. That's something, which makes us feel that given the budgetary allocation both at the center and at the union level and the tendencies at the state level, precisely because they have the resources shrinking,
Yes.
and greater responsibilities that they will have to shoulder on various accounts. I think we need to think in terms of enlarging the public resources for education, whether or not we have sectors in which participation of the private sector, we can't be really thinking of participation of private sector everywhere. But, wherever it is possible, yes. And whether it will answer the question that we have again, that is a very critical area of our understanding. Scholarships are very much needed, and there has to be progressive enhancement in that. In the last 7-8 years, there has been a much greater decline, both in terms of number, and if we adjust it with the inflation, I don't think that's a very satisfactory situation in which we are. One of the important points which was made that under allocation and underutilization, they are both interrelated, and if we have better better allocation, it would certainly lead to better utilization. We need to also have monitoring and review of the expenditure through a kind of a disaggregated set of parameters, not by going by the same heads of expenditure that has been going on for several decades, and maybe for the 30-40 years, the same head of expenditure remains unchanged. We got to really bring about changes therein. Teachers training, of course, forms the cornerstone of everything, and we got to really look in terms of preschool education and what kind of transformation that is required in one of the major segments, which is going to be a key player in preschool education, and that is the Anganwadi. And there the capability and the capacity of Anganwadi, both in terms of personnel and infrastructure, needs greater emphasis and greater attention. Inclusivity should not just remain a slogan. In fact, if the practice tells us that there are children who are dropping out, there are students who are in fact spending. The other day in Delhi University, I found that, I mean, there was a report that, not report, but somebody shared with me that students who are coming for PhD enrollment are, I have been sitting in such interviews until 22 that I retired. The average age was around 23, 24. Now the average ages have gone to almost about 28, 29 or 30. That means, people are spending so longer a time in education. They're coming back. I mean, I think, there is a big question mark there. Whether it is inclusive education or it is because they don't have jobs. So the linkages between education, qualification, and job is a serious area that we got to really look at. Education employment linkages is yet another area that we got to emphasize. Within that, we did discuss Skill India, and the fact remains that whether it is Samagra Shiksha in the new avatar of the Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan, which includes also the Madhyamik Shiksha, the goals of the RTE, that means the right to education and the objective, the dilution of Right to Education Act would not be good for the country. Rather, we got to progressively think in terms of further energizing RTE, both in terms of infrastructure provisioning and in terms of the kind of inputs that is required, particularly with reference to teachers, Yeah. So that is where, we got to really work a lot. We know that most of the states do not have a well defined network of diets. You have the state SCRTs, you have the NCRT, you have the SCRTs, and then you have the diets at the district level. I think out of 700 plus districts that we have in this country, we don't have so many diets. We have less than 50% districts with diets. Now, this is an important area, challenging area, if we want to really think in terms of pre what is called pre and post
Pre-service.
Yeah, pre-service and post-service training, which is a continuous program. Most of these SCRTs, they are understaffed. I mean, they don't even have regular teachers. I mean, at least I know of that in Punjab and Haryana, where I had the opportunity of working very recently. They are in a very bad shape. So, these are critical areas of intervention, which in fact we'll have to take a look at. And the final point is that, this is an interim budget. And when after the elections, maybe, we'll have a much larger budget to, in fact, talk about. That would be the appropriate occasion for all of us to again meet and discuss as to what is the direction in which education in India is going. We are in a stage of, we are sitting on a cusp of change, and this change is going to be much more rapid because of the changing technology and the changes in our societal framework, both in India and globally. So I think we are in for greater challenges. I hope education will respond to, or the educational system and the kind of response that the education system in India must have would take up some of these challenges. I would not really confine it to a segment of the population, which in fact have always benefited, no matter whether it came from the public education system or the private education system. That class remained absolutely unaffected. So we have to really look at
Sir, I would like to take your leave.
Who have been left out. Right. Yeah.
I would like to take your leave. I have some other.
Yeah, please. Now we are also closing now.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Anubha ji. And so we'll also close the discussion, and with the permission of IMPRI, thank you very much, IMPRI, for inviting us. And it was I certainly benefited enormously from the debate that went on. Thank you, panelists.
Thank you
so much.
Thank you,
As
sir.
we come to
Thank you,
today's
sir.
to the end of today's discussion, I, Remat Arora, researcher at IMPRI, Impact and Policy Research Institute, would like to propose a formal vote of thanks. On behalf of IMPRI, Center for ICT for Development, CICTD, I would like to thank all of you for attending today's deliberation, a panel discussion on education, science and technology, research and development, interim union budget 2024 to 25, as part of IMPRI's 4th annual series of thematic deliberations and analysis of interim union budget 2024 to 25. We are grateful to our chair for the session, Professor Sachidanand Sinha ji, our esteemed panelists, Dr. Y. Suresh Reddy ji, Dr. Protiva Kundu ji, and Advocate Anubha Shrivastava Sahai ji for taking part in today's discussion and enlightening us. We thank all of our participants who have raised pertinent questions and actively participated in today's deliberation. We are grateful if you're watching us later on our YouTube channel, or listening to us on our various podcasts, or reading our publications. You may also find more book discussions and thematic events under IMPRI Web Policy Talk series. We hope you continue to join us in the future to our IMPRI Web Policy Talk and Web Policy Learning. Wishing you a good evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, Prativa.